or political musical chair has finally ended in Britain, at least for the time being. An Indian origin man called Rishi Sunak has become the Prime Minister of Britain. Two important questions come up. Number one, what is the significance in the context of the current geopolitical scenario? And number two, what it means for India. And again, these two questions are interrelated. I'm going to answer the second question first because there is a sinister plot behind this move. Well, I could see this coming. I knew that Rishi Sunak would become the Prime Minister of Britain. Well, for the common Indians, it doesn't really mean anything. Their lives is not going to change by any means. Their hardship is going to continue. However, in the context of the current geopolitical chess game, this move has a great deal of significance. Combined West, led by United States of America and Britain, want to drag India into a global military conflict against Russia, China and Iran. I have discussed this in detail in my earlier videos. I'll share the links in the discussion section. You should watch. This has happened in the past. During the First and Second World War, India's vast natural and mineral resources and manpower were exploited by the British in order to support British war efforts in Europe. Coal, iron ore, aluminium, food grains, cotton, wood were plundered by the British in order to support British war efforts in Europe. Not only that, during the First World War, Indian soldiers fought in the battlefields of Europe as part of British Indian Army. Indian soldiers were thrown against Austro-Hungarian Empire and Imperial Germany all over Europe. India suffered a staggering loss of lives. More than 2 million Indian soldiers perished while fighting against these Axis forces, that is, against this Austro-Hungarian and German forces. British and United States of America is planning the same thing again, and this time they are up against Russia, China and Iran, and they want to exploit India's vast natural and mineral resources and India's manpower in the form of Indian armed forces, Indian scientists, engineers, technologists and doctors. This is their ultimate motive. This is their sinister plot. This is their sinister plan. The cabal of the ruling elites or the globalists think that Rishi Sunak has a bigger chance of influencing Indian political leadership. That is, the political leadership of Narendra Modi-led BJP. They have tried this with Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson has failed to influence Narendra Modi-led BJP government thanks to External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. And now that Boris Johnson is competing against Ursula von der Leyen of Germany for the role of NATO Secretary General's post, once Jens Stoltenberg's term is over, globalists have banked upon Rishi Sunak for this Rishi Sunak has the reach. He is the son-in-law of billionaire father-in-law N.R. Narayan Murthy. Rishi Sunak and his wife Akshata Murthy's combined fortune is estimated to be around 730 million British pound. But more importantly, through his father-in-law N.R. Narayan Murthy, Rishi Sunak has tremendous connections among India's business and political elites. These business elites, such as Ratan Tata, Anand Mahindra, Ellen Mittal, members of Godrej family, or members of London-based Hinduja family, or for that matter, India's crony capitalists such as Ambanis and Adanis, exert huge influence on India's political elites or political establishment. These people also exert tremendous influence on Indian deep state. Therefore, globalists and the Western deep state want to influence the Indian political establishment, that is the political leadership of Narendra Modi-led BJP through Rishi Sunak and Narayan Murthy's connections with the Indian political and business elites and the Indian deep state. There is a psychological aspect as well. Many Indians till this day live in a state of colonial hangover. These idiots die for Western recognition, particularly British and the American recognition. Combined West, led by Britain and the United States of America, have ignored and neglected India and never gave India its due respect. West always tried to portray India as an uncivilized backward nation. This is all part of a psychological warfare. Let's assume you ignore someone or neglect someone over and over again and do not give the importance and the respect he or she deserves. And finally, when you need some favor from that very person, you say a kind word or two, or you show some respect and give him some importance. And you'd see that they would probably listen to you and forget all the previous wrongdoings. Psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists do this all the time. This is an extremely unethical practice, and I would rather condemn if somebody does it. This is as good as waging a psychological warfare on that Indians very person. Need to understand this, particularly when Rishi Sunak himself is an elite, well entrenched into the elitist circle of business elites and political elites of Britain. By promoting Rishi Sunak as the British Prime Minister, these globalists or these ruling elites have tried to inflate the ego of millions of Indians. That is, they did an ego massage of the Indians. The Suella Biberman's comment has to be seen from this context as well. Suella Biberman first tried to hurt India's ego, and she was made to hurt this Indian ego, and then they would do an ego massage by promoting Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister of Britain. This is all part of a plan. Indians must not get carried away with this inflated false ego. Indians must not forget the comment made by the former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1943 regarding the Great Bengal Famine. During the Second World War, British, under the leadership of former Prime Minister and an absolute evil called Winston Churchill, orchestrated the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. Although it was referred to as Great Bengal Famine, in reality it affected entire eastern India, that is undivided Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Assam and Tripura. Estimated death toll could be as high as 3.8 million people in Bengal alone. As per my research, estimated death toll could be as high as 6 million across entire eastern India. But that is not all. Throughout the British Raj, there were other instances of famine as well. Great Bengal Famine of 1769, Chalisa Famine 1783, Doji Bara Famine 1791, Agra, that is Uttar Pradesh Famine 1837, Orissa Famine 1866, Rajputana Famine 1868, Bihar Famine 1873, South Indian Famine lasted for 3 years, 1875 to 1878, and Great Indian Famine 1899, and I have already talked about the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. Millions died in these famines. British administration under Winston Churchill orchestrated the Great Bengal Famine of 1943, and there is absolutely no doubt about this fact. Churchill comments, "They are a beastly people with beastly religion. Famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits." That was his comment. That was the comment of the British Prime Minister, then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. We got to remember this. Does it not constitute an act of war against the people of India? It constitutes an act of waging a war against the people of India with an intention to kill the Indians. And today I am saying Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Western Empire will pay for this crime against the humanity. India's partition is a direct consequence of British-American conspiracy. British intelligence orchestrated riots all over India, particularly along the fault lines in Punjab and Bengal. Millions perished in this process, and now look what Winston Churchill commented on India's partition. Well, if our poor troops have to be kept in a sweltering, syphilitic climate for the sake of your precious unity, I would rather see them have a good civil war. So, basically, Britain orchestrated a civil war during India's partition. So, you understand who was behind this carnage? Question, is it not a heinous crime against the humanity? British colonized India through British East India Company. British East India Company happens to be an offshoot trading house of Anglo-Dutch banking empire, and the Anglo-Dutch banking empire was controlled by the ruling elites of that era. This banking empire later got transformed into or metamorphosed into Anglo-American banking empire, and at the same time, British Empire got metamorphosed into American Empire. That is, Pax Britannica got transformed into Pax Americana. That is, American Empire essentially is the continuation of British Empire. And this happened after the Second World War. These East India companies, such as British East India Company, or for that matter Dutch East India Company, or for that matter French East India Company, looted and plundered undivided India, China, Indochina, Africa, and South America. And the ethnic communities in all these places were persecuted and subjugated, and they were pushed into abject poverty. Westerners orchestrated famines and killed millions in these places under the guise of famine. They also committed genocide of massive proportion or mass murder of massive proportion. Industrial revolution and rapid industrial growth in the Western countries during 18th, 19th and 20th century wouldn't have happened without this loot and plunder from Asia, Africa and South America. We got to remember investigative journalists from Great Game India correctly points out the real motive of United States of America, Britain and the combined West. West wants to save the fledgling Western economies through the exploitation of India. I quote, as often, history makes it a habit to repeat itself. In the last 200 years, whenever the West was in trouble, East India companies or subsequent managing partners of East India companies plundered India's human and natural resources for their survival. In this great game, they kept other geopolitical players at bay. And this is exactly what is happening now. We need to understand that deep state controls media. And deep state's job is to safeguard the interest of Western ruling elites or the globalists. And today's globalists are the descendants of the globalists of that era. And Rishi Sunak is their tool, their pawn and nothing else. Therefore, Indians must think critically and rationally. Indians must not feel elated or inflated now that a practicing Hindu has become the Prime Minister of Britain. This really doesn't mean anything. And this narrative is being peddled by the mainstream media. Indian mainstream media would also make an attempt to portray this as a victory of Narendra Modi's foreign policy. This is again a total bullshit. This is actually an attempt as part of mainstream media to do Narendra Modi's ego massage. Mainstream media will try to set a narrative that Rishi Sunak becoming the British Prime Minister is enough reason for India aligning with Britain, United States of America axis in an eventual geopolitical conflict. This is again utterly ridiculous. We got to remember that in the late 1980s, when India was about to make its stride forward in computer science and information technology, N.R. Narayan Murthy, that is the father-in-law of British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, set up a company called Infosys. This company was neither a tech company nor a product development company. This company was into services. Basically, this company was a glorified body shopping company and nothing else. Therefore, this company set a wrong trend at the very beginning. Therefore, Infosys was a trend setter and it set a wrong trend or wrong precedence. It gave a wrong direction to the Indian tech space. Over the next 2 decades, most of the Indian companies took a wrong direction and focused on services rather than on technology and product development. That is, Infosys subverted the Indian tech space. Many years later, the same company, that is Infosys, subverted India again through the biometric-driven Aadhaar card project or UIDAI project. Push for this project came from the top, that is, from the globalists or the Western ruling elites. Indian National Congress understood the danger of this project. In this kind of scenario, Indian National Congress generally adopts a slow and sluggish approach whereby jeopardizing and sabotaging the project itself. However, once Narendra Modi and BJP-led NDA government came to power in 2014, urgency could be seen. Narendra Modi and BJP-led NDA government pushed for a quick completion of this project. Infosys was a key player in this project and Nandan Nilekani was a key figure in this project. This is where a surveillance state in India got an organized structure and more importantly, the entire Indian population ran into the risk of being exposed to the surveillance by the deep state and the foreign intelligence. In this Aadhaar project, Unique Identification Authority of India, that is UIDAI, contracted a company called Crossmatch. This company is owned by Francisco Partners, which owns Israel-based cyber warfare company called NSO Group, which developed the spyware cum cyber weapon called Pegasus. You might have heard of it. This is basically a spyware come cyber weapon, and this is developed by the NSO Group, which is an Israeli company which is owned by Francisco Partners. And all this actually came to light first time in 2017 through the expose of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Now you can understand the nexus. In 2016, demonetization in India was influenced by the deep state through an American organization called USAID and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And with that, trial run to tie up the entire world population to the digital economy and biometric surveillance grid or population control grid was completed. And along with that, an economic warfare was also waged upon India and India's economically marginalized section and India's informal economy, which happens to be India's main strength, was smashed. So, therefore, try to think rationally, think critically, and understand the things so that you can safeguard your interests. Thank you.